Welcome to episode 7 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on May 3rd, 2019. Today I'd like to talk to you about some progress on the Master Hand Knitter program and some thoughts that's made me think. I'll share a little bit about the Connecticut Sheep, Wool and Fiber Festival, and there's a winner for the bag giveaway from Little Comforts A to Z on Etsy, and there'll be another giveaway. All that plus some music to knit by. I'm recording very early in the day today. I'm trying to get a crack on things before the house wakes up, but not quite as early as I was planning, so we might hear some footsteps and doors shutting towards the end of this. I won't make you wait until the end to hear who the winner of episode 6's giveaway is. I realized as I was writing up the show for this week that the contest post on Instagram says it's for the episode 7 giveaway. So yeah, we all make mistakes. It was actually announced in episode 6. But anyway, this is the giveaway that includes a project bag from Little Comforts A to Z on Etsy, a hank of hand-spun alpaca from my trip to Peru a few years back, and a set of stitch markers. There were 280 entries, and a random number generator picked number 2, which feels like the random generator was trying to wake up itself. But the winner is Bonnie J. And then I'm not sure if it's an I or a lowercase l or just the up and down line. You will know who you are. It's a member of the Ravelry group. I will contact Bonnie J through Ravelry on the morning this episode goes live. If you didn't win this time, that's okay. I'll have a new giveaway to announce later in the program. Congratulations, Bonnie J. I hope you enjoy your winnings. I'd like to switch focus to report on my progress with the Master Hand Knitter program. The last time I worked on it, I resolved to knit a whole scarf in seed stitch to give myself a good long opportunity to practice different modifications so I can figure out what works for me to get a nice uniform fabric. Seed stitch, of course, is when you alternate between knit and purl across the row, and then on the wrong side, you purl the knits and knit the purls. So you end up with a checkerboard effect made from the knits and purls. The tricky part of seed stitch is getting the tension right, so you don't have irregular gaps between the stitches. So working on a scarf rather than a series of swatches as I practice this will allow me to try out various tweaks to my technique without ending up with just a pile of swatches that I have to figure out what to do with. One of the things I knew I needed to do to improve my swatch was to give my full attention to my knitting as I worked. I clearly could not think of this as TV knitting. So I have cast on for the scarf, and I've only knit about an inch so far because I have been so busy with work that I just haven't had time to focus purely on my knitting. This was backburnered for a bit before I was able to cast on for it, and so I've been thinking about it for quite a while, and I think that I actually have hit on something that has helped. So far, I don't have any gaps between the stitches that are larger than any other at this point, so I think I'm onto something. What I've been doing is I'm working the stitches with just the tips of the needles. So I bunch the knitting up on the left hand needle so that the next few stitches I'm going to work are actually on the tapered area rather than on the shaft of the needle. And then I use the tapered area of the right needle to work the stitch. And then when the stitch is finished, I slip it to the main part of the right hand needle rather than leaving it on the tapered area, because if I did that, then the stitch would end up too tight. As I said, I'm getting more uniform results this way, and I think I'll work it this way for a while and then probably take it to the Knitting Guild Association's Ravelry board for some feedback, because there are still gaps. They're very small. If I hold the fabric up between myself and a light source, I can see that they're there. But like I said, they're all uniform now. So I just want to make sure that that's okay, or find out if I need to be knitting it all tighter so that there's no gaps whatsoever if I hold it between me and a light source. But for now, I'm pleased to have found a way to achieve uniformity. That said, it's kind of a pain to have to work knitting at the tips because it always feels to me like it's about to jump off the needles. But by giving it my full attention, I'm more aware of that issue anyway, so I'm keeping on top of it. So there you go. Practice and progress. Things are coming along. Let's go into our first music break. I was trying to think of a theme for the music in this episode. Usually I try to connect it to the content somehow, but I was having a hard time finding songs related to the topics I'm going to talk about in this episode. And then I was looking at the calendar and I realized Mother's Day will fall between this episode and episode 8. So I thought we'd go for some mother-related music. We all have mothers. Some of us are one. I was digging around on various sites where indie artists post their work and, well, indie artists seem to have some mama issues. So we're going to focus on teenagers instead. I came across this song by The Crypts from their album No Life After Crips, and it's not the type of music I usually pick for the podcast, but you know what? It made me laugh. You may need to turn your sound down a little. This song is called Teenager, and if you're looking for a quiet moment, you might want to skip ahead 2 minutes. But if you're listening while you're running or trying to get through some chores, this is going to move you along. So anyway, it's called Teenager. I was one. You were one. I have 2 of my own. Let's just say this song is relatable. The bits that don't apply to my kids sure did apply to me when I was their age. So hats off to all the teens out there and the moms who haven't killed them.
I'm a teenager. 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 Wear what I want. Don't need shoes. Not brushing my teeth. Ain't gonna sleep. Usually have what? Flipping the bird. Don't need school. Gotta be cool. I'm a teenager. 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 Gonna live till I die. Children don't cry. Cell phones crack. Don't give me flack. 4 years old. Food's gone cold. Where's my snack? In my backpack. I'm a teenager. 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 I'm a teenager.
You know what? I take that back. I think that last song does apply to the content of this episode. When I was first starting Swatch 3 for the Master Hand Knitter program, this seed stitch swatch that I'm knitting a scarf to practice, I was working too loosely and then too tightly. Then I'd get distracted by the show I had on in the background and my movements would get too exuberant with my needles. I'd catch myself and focus again and then get distracted once more and my needles would begin flailing out at awkward angles again. I was making fabric, but it had areas where I nailed it and areas full of big gaps. I had a goal. I knew what I wanted to make, but there was a whole lot of other interesting things going on around me that were claiming parts of my attention. I want to be a master knitter, but I also want to watch Netflix. I want to be proficient in this skill, but I also just want it to happen automatically. When it came time to put in the practice, I found other things to do, like knitting tiny hats and taking on more of my day job work. The easier path, the cuter path, the path that brought in some dough, they all won out over the skills I really wanted to pursue. I think about what I was like as a teenager, and I think about what my kids are going through now, and I see some of the same tendencies toward wanting to master something and saying you want to master something and not wanting to actually do the kind of repetitive, sometimes boring practice that it takes to truly get it right. And sometimes they are willing to put in that work, but they don't really know how to start or whether what they're doing is going to get the positive responses they're looking for. And that's okay. That's almost what this time of life is for, figuring all of that stuff out. It feels like a high stakes game at times when you're a teenager, but most have a place to live and eat. Most have a framework of people around them that will keep them from getting too off base. And they can try things and see what works. They can experiment with avoiding responsibility and see how that pays off. They can try a job and test whether it's a good fit. Are they a jock? Are they a geek? Are they some combination of the two? Maybe with a little bit of goth thrown in? Now is the time when they get to experiment. And as long as they respect a certain level of boundaries, they come out of it on the other side of this crazy time wiser than when they started, knowing what worked and what didn't. And, eventually they do figure it out. I am a boring grown-up myself with a husband and kids and responsibilities. But as far as my knitting goes, I am a teenager. I am figuring out what works. And for now, my fabric is a little wonky and a little holey, but it's still fabric. I'm testing what happens when I hold my needles differently, when I tension the yarn a certain way, when I focus, and when I don't. And over time, I'm realizing that if I want to get to my goal, if I want to earn the label, I've got to start paying attention to what works and abandon what doesn't. And maybe someday I'll get to be a knitting grown-up. How many other areas of my life are there that I'm functioning at the level of a teenager? It doesn't really bear thinking about, but awareness, that is what seems to be the essential component for improvement. And maybe a little grace as we cut ourselves some slack for trying. No ad this week. Instead, I want to draw your attention to the Knitter's Pride Spring Charity Knit or Crochet Along for Warm Up America. Knitter's Pride is asking people to knit or crochet 7-inch by 9-inch rectangles out of machine washable and dryable acrylic yarn. Send those squares to Warm Up America and you may qualify to win a prize. The knitter who makes the most squares will win a set of deluxe ginger interchangeable needles, and the crocheter who makes the most squares will receive a Zing crochet set. I do not have time to knit enough to even come close to winning, but I still plan to knit my bit. You do not need to join the squares together. Warm Up America assembles them as they are needed by the various organizations that they provide the blankets to. So it's really a quick and easy way to add some good to the world. The project actually launched on May 1st and it will end on May 31st. There's a form they'd like you to submit with your squares, so hop over to the Knitter's Pride discussion board on Ravelry or check the show notes for episode 7 at ithoughtiknewhow.familypodcasts.com for a link that will take you to the complete information about this charity project, including the submission form, the address to mail the squares to, and suggested patterns. So clean out your stash and do some good with it. I told my youngest I was drawing the comparison between being a teenager and doing the Master Hand Knitter program, and she said, well, then I assume the Master Knitter program sucks, is frustrating, and you only think you know how to do it. So, yeah. Well, I'm glad she wasn't offended at the comparison. Oh, my goodness. Okay. I have made a bit of progress on some projects since the last time I spoke to you. I, for real and true, finished the Sensilla cowl and Nigiri wrist warmers. I wove in the ends, took pictures, I've worn them out and about. They are done. I have not, however, finished anything else. I've completed the knitting of the cold sand cowl in the dragonfly fibers yarn, but I still need to give it a gentle blocking and sew up the seam. I've just been so busy with work that it's just sitting on top of some books to the side of my desk, waiting for me to finish it for real, not making me feel guilty at all, I swear. It might be another week or two before I can get to it. I needed another mindless knit though, so I cast on a Gaia shoulder hug with a ball of Noro Tayo sock. It's a top-down V-shaped shawl that builds from the center of the shoulders outward and downward. It's a free pattern on Ravelry designed by Anne Carroll Gilmore. You're meant to work with a self-striping yarn, and when you get to a color change, you knit a 3-row series that creates eyelets, and then you knit plain again until the next color change. But you can imagine that as the shawl grows, you end up just doing the eyelet rows because the color changes come closer and closer together as the shawl gets wider. I'm not crazy about how that looks, so I'm currently letting the color change 2 or 3 times before I work the eyelet row so that the eyelet sections stay separated by stockinette. I have another hank from Dragonfly Fibers that I plan to work up once I finish this shawl. It's raw silk in a solid red, and I think it's going to become an Iron Maiden shawl. That's a $6 shawl pattern on Ravelry designed by Marissa Hernandez. But I have just made that initial pairing like in my mind at this point. We'll have to see how it goes once I cast on. But I think it will make for a nice summery shawl. It's a very airy pattern that I think will be nice for summer. Since I last spoke to you all, the Connecticut Sheep, Wool, and Fiber Festival happened. It was a nice little one-day event. They had some sheepdogs demonstrating their skills, and they did some sheep shearing. There were some Angora rabbits to pat that were just balls of adorable floof. I picked up some yarn by Once Upon a Corgi to make a shawl, as well as a corgi butt enamel pin. Katrinkles was there selling their wooden notions, and I got a bunch of laser cut cheat sheets to go into my knitting bags so I don't have to Google things like Kitchener stitch anymore. I don't know, Google has made our lives so much easier. I would have had to go digging through books to find the directions for Kitchener stitch because I don't use it that often, so I never remember the order. But now it just bugs me that I have to go to Google. I'm like, why can't I just have this somewhere? Well, now I do. I have a little wooden tag with it written on it that I can just keep in my bag. I also picked up from them a Rhinebeck sweater tag, which I suppose means I need to knit one, so I should start thinking about that. If you're already knitting a Rhinebeck sweater, and you wouldn't mind sharing what you're working on, please maybe go to the episode post on the Ravelry group and let people know what you're working on. And maybe we can start inspiring one another to work on our Rhinebeck sweaters. I literally have not thought about it at all. And now I'm thinking, the time between now and October is actually short when you're planning on working a sweater. So I really need to start thinking about that. Yankee Knitter Designs was also there selling their patterns, and I walked in their booth, and it sort of felt like everything was kind of familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I picked up a pattern for an Aran cardigan and some hats, and when I got home, I flipped through a binder of my mother's old patterns and realized that she had been a loyal customer of theirs through the years. In fact, the reason why one particular sweater looked so familiar was because my mother had knit one for herself and she wore it all the time. It's their mock cable sweater, which is mostly a plain knit sweater with a yoke of mock cables. But she'd also made herself the Fisher Lad Guernsey, and I know she'd knit many of their children's sweaters that had animals across the chest for some of the little ones she knew. But it was one of those things where you see something and you know it's familiar, but everything's just a little off. Because of course she was using different yarns or different colors than what they had in the booth. So I was just there in their booth, sort of looking at things, trying to place where I'd seen them before, and I might have seemed a little creepy. I really hope not. Anyway, I also picked up some hand-spun Tunis breed yarn. I did not recognize the breed type that day, and I had to look them up later. It turns out that Clara Parks does cover the Tunis breed in the Knitter's Book of Wool, but I was sort of chatting with the booth owner, and I didn't want to be like, excuse me, I'm going to look up your fiber now. So I just realized it wasn't a breed I'd tried before and decided to grab it so I could give it a go. They're actually raised primarily for their meat, and they're considered a rare breed, not rare in the sense that it's like Kiviat or something where everyone's like, oh, I have to have it, but just rare because they're not being raised as much. It's been dyed bright green with purple and orange sections and is a 2-ply woolen spun that ranges from about Aran weight to a true bulky. So unless I use it as some sort of accent wool in a project, it's probably going to become a cowl because there's only 66 yards in total and I have a cowl addiction. But I wanted, like I said, I wanted to snatch it up for the opportunity to try out the breed. Next year, the location for the Connecticut Sheep, Wool and Fiber Festival will move to the North Haven Fairground and be on April 25th, 2020. So local folks, be aware. If you're in the New York City area, that will actually move it a bit closer to you. And I imagine it may be a bigger event now that it will be located at a proper fairground. Let's take another break real quick. This song isn't quite so raucous, I promise. In the last episode, I featured a few old phonograph recordings, and I thought this one would be fun to play as a comparison to the earlier teenager song. This is called Oh Mother, I'm Wild by Howard Johnson, Harry Pease, and Eddie Nelson. It was published in 1920, and this wild young man moved to New York City, began to drink Coca-Cola, wear pink pajamas, and bathe in perfumed water. The Scandal.
Beautiful Alfie was a sweet little boy, always dressed up like little Lord Fauntleroy. Early to bed and early to rise didn't make Percival very wise. But after a month on Broadway, here's what he wrote home today. Oh, mother, you wouldn't know your child. Oh, mother, I'm getting awfully wild. I am drinking Coca-Cola now. On the level, I'm a little devil. Oh, mother, you wouldn't want me home. Cannibals compared to me are mild. I'm no more your peaceful little lamb. I shave most every day just like a man. I've thrown away my nightie and I wear pink pajamas. Oh, oh, mother, I'm wild. Percival went to see a musical show. He had a seat right in the very front row. These girls began to shimmy and shake. Then Percy hollered out, for goodness sake, oh, mother, if you could just see, this is the life, dear, for me. Oh, mother, you wouldn't know your child. Oh, mother, I'm getting awfully wild. I am reading snappy stories now. Every minute I just go the limit. Oh, mother, you wouldn't want me home. Cannibals compared to me are mild. One night I stayed out till after 10. Bought some Cubeb cigarettes and then I stood right on the corner and I smoked with all the men. Oh, oh, mother, I'm wild. I bathe myself in perfume just to wash my sins away. Oh, oh, mother, I'm wild.
A few more things before I go. First, I have a new giveaway for you. This one will be made up of some odds and ends that I picked up at the Connecticut Sheep, Wool and Fiber Festival. There's a taster hank of Once Upon a Corgi yarn in the Dream Kitchen colorway. It's pink and white and gray, and it has a strand of sparkle running through. There are also a couple of tools from Katrinkles. One is the directions for Kitchener stitch. The other is a 1-inch gauge measure. There's also a little wooden heart tag you can sew into the edge of a project. There's a stitch marker from 7th Floor Yarn that says All-Star Knitter. And there was a potter there selling miniature pots and jugs and things, and I picked up a little blue pitcher with a heart on it, and I thought it might look cute holding your darning needles on your desk or a little shelf. I'll throw in a set of stitch markers from my remaining inventory, and we'll call this surprise package. This giveaway is open to listeners worldwide. If you are a member of the Ravelry group or follow me on Instagram, you're already entered in the contest. If you haven't joined the group or followed me on Instagram, that's a way to get one entry for each. Sticking with the theme that developed over the course of the episode, find the post about episode 7 on Ravelry and tell me a story about your teen years that makes you laugh now. We all have them. Share one of yours. Please keep it family friendly. And I'll give you 5 entries for the giveaway. So you can get up to 7 entries altogether by being part of the Ravelry group, following me on Instagram, and telling me a story on the group thread for episode 7. Second, the Massachusetts Sheep and Woolcraft Fair is coming up on May 25th to 26th. That's a Saturday and Sunday. It's at the Cummington Fairgrounds in Western Massachusetts. At this point, I'm about 80% sure I'm going to be there on Saturday. My husband will be out of town, so if something comes up that I have to deal with, I will not be there, but the plan is to go. If you would like to meet up at the fair, let me know and we can make a plan. I was meant to find knitting travels while I was at the Connecticut Fest, but we didn't have a plan to make it happen, and I was so focused on all the goodies that I wasn't paying enough attention to faces, so lesson learned. Maybe we can agree to meet at noon while all the sheep are moving to the sheep show ring for the shearing demonstration. I've not been before, so I don't know if that's possible. If you have been before and you know of a good place to meet, send me a message and I'll announce it in episode 8 so those who are going will know where to gather to say hi. I will warn you. I am sometimes an awkward creature when meeting new people, so have pity on my poor shy self. I'm actually trying to plan for a knitting-related event each month. May is going to be the Massachusetts Sheep and Woolcraft event. In June, I'm going to try to do the 4-day I-91 yarn shop hop. I'll likely do the stores in my immediate area on Thursday and then hit those south of me on Friday and ones to the north of me in Massachusetts and Vermont on Saturday. If you're planning on doing that event, I'd be happy to arrange to meet in one of the stores if we can make that work. There's not a ton of information about this event online that I can find. Some of the stores have information in their blogs. I'll pick one of their posts and link to it in the show notes for those who want more information. But essentially, it's 11 yarn stores along the Interstate 91 corridor from New Haven, Connecticut up to Putney, Vermont. The passport's $5 and you can purchase it at any of the participating shops. Just going into the shop is enough to earn a passport stamp and an entry for the daily door prize in that store. So you do not have to go broke on this shop hop to participate. There are 48 chances to win a daily door prize. If you visit all 11 shops, you can enter a drawing for a grand prize, which looks amazing. It includes gift certificates for all the shops and then yarn and a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't know if I'm going to go crazy shopping on this hop, but I've only been to 5 of the 11 shops, so I'm mostly interested to see what the other shops are like and what they have normally in their stock. So that's on the horizon. About that time, I'm going to put the show into hiatus for a couple of months for summer. But during the hiatus in July, I will be in New York City for a total of 11 days spread out over 3 weeks while my daughter takes some summer classes at the Fashion Institute of Technology. So I'm going to make my own yarn-related event and try to get around to as many yarn shops in the city as I can during the day while she's in class. If you're in New York City and want to connect, let me know. In the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you would like to contact me, you can email me at ann@familypodcasts.com. That's Ann with an E, at familypodcasts.com. I'm on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube as I Thought I Knew How. If it is a place that allows you to put spaces between words, then there are spaces between the words. Otherwise, it's all one word. The Facebook and Ravelry groups are both called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. I'm on Twitter as @ThoughtIKnewHow. Now, I have said all that, but you will find me for the most part on Ravelry or Instagram. I do have a website for the show at ithoughtiknewhow.familypodcast.com. There you will find the show notes for each episode, including links to products I've mentioned and ways to help support the show. Every now and then I post a blog post there too. Remember, you can help support local communities across the nation by taking part in the Knitter's Pride Spring Knit and Crochet Along to make squares for blankets to be distributed to those who need them. There will be a link in the show notes for that. If you're a musician or know one and would like to have a song featured on the program, drop me an email and point me to where I can hear your music. You need to be the copyright holder to be able to grant permission, so please keep that in mind. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarns without joins, and plenty of time to knit.